Hello, I'm going to talk with you about AVID Tutorials. Now, AVID Tutorials are important because it teaches us how to lead a study group. There will be a point where you will be in a class that is difficult and you need to work with your peers in order to solve problems and help to understand what's happening in the class without having to contact the professor to answer questions. So study groups can be a great way to review material and make sure that you're understanding your classes. Now, when you're writing a tutorial, a good thing to do is to write about something that you actually need help with. Philosophical issues are fun and they're fun to discuss in a group, but if you're struggling with a content in a course and you bring together a study group at some point in your college life, then you're going to need to spend your time discussing things that you guys really need to solve together rather than talking about philosophical issues or controversial conversations, because then you're going to leave the study group and still not have your problem solved. So the point of tutorials is to teach you how to break down material that's difficult in your classes without having to have a professor there to guide you. And so the tutorial process that we teach you in AVID, we do it in high school so that you learn these skills so that when you're on your own, you don't need us to help facilitate a tutorial. And you also won't need these resources. So later, right now we're teaching you the templates. And later, you can customize these templates however you wish and apply them into your coursework and into your study groups however you wish. So right now, in order to teach you the process and the elements of a tutorial, we have this TRF document. Now, this TRF document is completed prior to a tutorial. The reason that we complete it is so that you can identify what your question is. If you've ever been in a group of students and no one seems to know what to focus on and then time is wasted, you know exactly how it feels not to have a clarified question at the beginning of a conversation with your peers. So the point of the tutorial is to come up with, what am I struggling with? Where do I need help? What are the steps that I already understand? Okay, and you chart that on here. So later, when you're leading your own study groups in college, you won't need this document, but you might want to use some elements of it. Knowing where you're at, what you understand, what the key vocabulary is, those are important parts to being able to find out and figure out what your struggle is. And then on the back, you chart out the steps that you understand because you're trying to identify which steps you don't understand. Hold on. All right, so on the back, you're charting the steps and trying to identify at what point are you getting confused. And you may be thinking like, well, by the time I do all this, I'm going to solve my problem. That's completely possible, and that is okay, because obviously this was something you were struggling with. So when you get to the tutorial group, it's not a bad thing to review it again and to work with your peers to go through that process so that you can make sure you truly understand. So by the time you get through a tutorial, your problem should be solved, your questions should be answered, and you should be able to explain what you've done in the tutorial, like the process of solving that problem, like backward and forward. So you'll know it. Because a tutorial is very involved. And I know you're like, oh, but why? Because when you're on your own and you need to work through problems, you'll be able to do so if you've got an idea of how to facilitate that. So during a tutorial, we have these 2 column notes. This is the during a tutorial. So what happens is the person who has the problem, they're presenting their TRF, right? Their identified point of confusion, their question. They present it. They present the key vocabulary. They present what they know. They present the steps that are involved in the problem that they know thus far. And then you guys that are in the group, the tutorial group, you ask them questions, clarifying questions. So on one side, you're writing down what they are writing down that they know about the material. On the other side, you're writing down questions that your group asked them to help them try to solve their own problem. Key item. You're helping them solve their own problem by asking them questions. You are not saying, well, the answer is 52. Because if you tell them the answer, they don't know how to solve the problem on their own, and then they really don't understand it. So then they go to class, they go take the test, and they actually don't know the material. So you're not giving them the answer. Instead, you're helping direct their thinking by asking questions to help them get there. Now, let's say nobody in your tutorial group knows the answer. Then that's okay. You guys are working through it together. All right. Now, if you get to the end of a tutorial and you still haven't solved the problem, you've got like 5 of you and none of you have solved it in college. Let's say this happens. You guys are studying in the library. You get to the end of it. You still do not know the answer. That is when it is time to go to the professor, to go to a tutor, and try to find help, because that means that all of you need to review that material because nobody knew and nobody was able to help solve that problem. So yeah. So if you get to the last step, which is the reflection, where you're looking back at the process and you're looking back at your point of confusion and you're identifying how you were able to understand that information. If you get to the reflection and you're like, I can't explain it, I don't know what the answer was, and I don't know how I processed that and got from point A to point B. If you answer no on these questions, like I do not know, I have no information to share, then you do not understand the material. And now you need to go back. You either need to go back to that study group and repose that question, or you need to find help elsewhere. You need to go to a tutor with the university. You need to contact those online tutoring systems that a lot of universities have, or you need to go to the professor and get help. Okay, so there are 3 parts in a quality tutorial. There is the TRF, which you complete first. You got to know what your question is before you can spend time solving it. That's just like 101, right? Because you don't want to waste time, especially when you're in college and you're working and you're going to school full time and you've got all of these obligations. You don't want to waste time. If you're going to do a study group, you guys need to know what the question is that you're going to solve before you get there. So you want to go to the study group and say, here's where I'm struggling. Let's work on this. And then tell your peers, identify where you're struggling. Let's all bring a question. Somebody's got to be the leader. So you guys can be the ones to say, all right, everybody, we're going to meet in the library. Here's the plan. Let's all bring a question. So this is tutorial 101 to prevent you from wasting time in college. Being able to work through the process together and help guide using questions instead of just giving a person the answer is super important, because then you're actually making sure that they know the material and you're helping them learn. And then finally, the reflection. This is not something you'll need to do when you're on your own in college, but you need to know the process, because the idea is that you're reviewing and identifying, do I really know the answers to these questions? So you guys can do this. It's an important skill, and I'm really proud of you for continuing to fine tune it. Well done. Go be Pegasus.